Welcome to Comic Cave, the ultimate podcast where art and Dungeons & Dragons collide. I'm your host, DNDWife, and I'm thrilled to take you on a creative journey like no other. Each week, we'll dive into the world of fantasy art, exploring stunning digital pieces, intricate miniature paintings, and captivating character portraits. I'll be joined by amazing guest hosts, sharing their insights, tips, and tricks to help you bring your own artistic visions to life. We'll uncover the stories behind each artwork, from the initial spark of inspiration to the final brushstroke. And as a special treat, much of the art we discuss will be from our beloved homebrew world of Extraeus. So whether you're a seasoned artist, a curious newbie, or just a fan of nerd culture, Comic Cave is here to inspire and connect you with the magic of creating art that reflects your passions. Join us every week on Comic Cave, and let's embark on this artistic adventure together. Don't forget to subscribe and let your imagination soar. Welcome everybody to another episode of Couple of Nerds. I'm your host, DNDWife, and with me is my co-host and husband, Dungeon Master Eguile.
How's it going, everyone?
Welcome. We are also joined today by our guest, Richard here.
Hi, I'm the guy behind Tobias and a certified pain in my DM's butt.
And we're so glad to have you here today for our miniature painting series where we go over some of the miniatures that we've painted for the campaign. Specifically today, we're going to be talking about our Lionfolk Cleric, Tobias. And it's not just Tobias, because we're also going to be talking about his accompanying cart. So we're going to be talking about specifically the inspiration behind Tobias's design, how we built him, how I got, the inspiration from his player, the detailed painting techniques that we built for him, and the unique aspects of his character and accompanying cart as well. So with that, let's get right into it. I want to really look at, what the inspirations were for Tobias. You had mentioned some of it is based off of like early Roman culture. So explain a little bit about how you came up with the look for Tobias.
Yeah, I kind of started from the ground up, lion guys. So I wanted to be a little different. And I really also let the character dictate how he looked. So I went to to see what kind of armors I had available to wear, and I was able to use heavy armor, and that kind of developed a look from there.
Okay.
I wanted to go more for, like you said, that kind of like Greco-Roman look with the bits of tunic over covering the breastplating.
I feel like it really, really works in the sense of whereas my role as a DM into kind of where the culture and the development of armor is. So instead of if he was decked out in this heavy plate, it wouldn't make sense in the story.
True, right? But he's a Lionfolk, so he doesn't really need, I guess, too much armor per se. He's really kind of a powerhouse on his own.
Well, also starting off, he wouldn't be, fully decked out in plate mail and whatnot. And, the armor, he could get more armored. It was more so, like you said, with him being, very fuzzy and in an arid location, that he wouldn't be, swathed in cloth and lots of, thick clothing. It's, more kind of, draped on kind of feeling. It wanted to be kind of loose. And, he's a cleric, so I wanted to give him more of, a flowy feel, too.
Okay.
Juxtaposed to the hard armor.
I think it also shows a little bit of kind of the mystery towards Tobias himself, because obviously being the healer, there's always kind of that assumption, healer has a staff, and they're not really skilled. But when you see someone who is both donned in armor, but not to the point where their entire body, they obviously have some sense of skill to them, right? Yep. You see him with this spear and shield. It's if not told you were a cleric, your character doesn't necessarily exude this I'm the weak and I'm a priest in a robe holding my rosary. It's okay, I also heal, but I also can defend myself if I need to.
Right.
I very much so wanted that too, where I wanted to give him the look of very imposing and big with the spear and shield. But then it's right behind that is the most affable person ever, who's just very polite and kind.
Yeah, and I think that's really what you, DNDWife, was really pushing on the mini, was okay, let's, obviously in an opposite of the kind of digital art we've looked at over and over again, you have this kind of very small medium in order to project what Richard was looking for in Tobias.
Well, Richard, you were going for the cleric, right? So he had to be humble. He can't have a lot of, things on him, on his person, especially shiny things. Those aren't really his style, I imagine. And we kind of talked a little bit about that. How how did that, I think, in your mind's eye, fit into the way that the miniature would interact with the world?
It's like you said, he is a very humble-looking person, and I wanted him to have that kind of mix of, the humbleness of the cloth, but then also like the armor underneath it to be a bit imposing, to show the like mix of in his background that he was, a fighter who also grew up learning how to heal, with his hands, and then later magically as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
I think it really kind of shows, and it really kind of shows that it's like that sense that he is grounded both in strength and humility, right? Like it is that kind of imposing force, and I think that really kind of built a lot into not only the character but the miniature as well. And I think that creates a really cool, like, practical effect while not being too ornate to where it's like showboaty.
Yeah, I really love the look that he has, because even though he's got armor, he's got weaponry in his hands, the miniature itself is very dynamic. He's standing at attention with a shield in front of him and a spear behind him. And I love the fact that the shield comes first, because Tobias's main goal is not to maim or hurt anybody. It is to protect, whether it's himself or anybody else. And I think the miniature really had to reflect that. So I love the stance that you gave. It's very sort of protect, but not be hurtful.
Now, Richard, was this a like a pre-made mini, or did you make this one custom?
Custom, yeah. I had to go through and try and adjust everything, and like you said, the pose I worked on a while on, because I really wanted it to look like he was more ushering people behind him rather than like charging forward, like holding his ground to defend.
Holding the line essentially while everybody gets to safety first. I love that, and it definitely shows here. It gives more of that humility of the cleric being self-sacrificing, be like, I will stand, get everyone back.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of visual to it. Now, is there anything kind of like a character or any kind of inspiration you really took for in kind of building that like kind of look to him?
One of my first inspirations, honestly, was Ezio from Assassin's Creed a little bit.
I kind of got that vibe a little bit.
That's where the like half cape and the
flowy kind of blending
half cape
in,
and the like the tunic that kind of leads into like a hood.
Yeah, kind of like Altair as well. Like I get that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's very much like if he needed to, he could shroud himself, but it's also like the little bit of pauldron sticking out where it's like, oh, it's armored like underneath like the
cloak.
Underneath.
Gotcha.
Like,
yeah.
Some hidden protection for extra care. I really love that, but I want to go more, I guess, into the details, the techniques.
Let's look at
painting.
The mini itself.
Yeah.
I mean, that really is kind of, because for us, like, as much as the digital art's cool, the mini is what we see all the time.
Yeah, right. We interact with them, we play with them at the table, so it's really important to see how they were built, how they were painted up, and how that interacts with not just the table, but also the story itself. I think one of the key features, obviously, to talk about is that Tobias is a lion. He's a very lion-like in appearance.
He's a furry guy.
But he's also a black cat. So it's very difficult to integrate a sort of furry look to black fur, because it can be. We have a black cat. He's awesome, but he can blend in really well in the shadows.
Now, was there a reason for you choosing? Because what most people don't know is you actually picked the kind of color scheming for all the tribes. Was there a reason why you went with black for your own?
Yeah.
I think it was a little bit due to like prodding from you guys about like the Aslan thing, and I was like, I can see that.
Yeah, that was an initial joke. That was kind of, and then you're a healer lion. I mean, how could you not be black lion?
I almost wasn't a black lion when I like decided to do Twilight Cleric, because I was like, black lion Twilight Cleric. I was like, is that a little too on the nose?
Oh, gotcha.
But then I don't know. I kind of thought that out of all of like the lion types, I thought it looked like the most imposing and scary. And then I thought again it would be good to have the one that seemed the scariest be the one that is, the
nicest.
Yeah, the nicest.
Yeah.
And then, kind of as the dynamic goes back into their actual culture, them being more like the leaders and like, trying to help everybody else instead.
Absolutely.
Really that kind of counter to what they look like.
Yeah.
And because they're so intimidating, it's really hard to build that texture in the fur.
Right. You're using tiny paintbrushes.
Yeah. So I did give him the base coat that was standard black, but I went back and I used a little bit of lighter gray dry brush over to highlight some of the areas of the fur where the light is hitting, or, you know, where he has maybe some differently colored hair or something, just to give him that little extra pop of color and texture to the fur.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not only counting, but it's also a tiny miniature. Like, you're also trying to show that detail in this tiny 1-inch scale miniature.
It's tough, but I added the details to like the ends of the feet to show like the receding of the hair as the feet end. I added them to the tips of the tail, these highlights to the back of the hair, the mane, as well as to like the edge of his nose and the snout portion, to add that.
Now you say dry brushing. Now, just to obviously explain to people kind of that technique, how would you explain that technique to somebody?
Gotcha. So normally when you're painting a miniature, you water down your paints quite a bit in order to get a sort of smoother application, so that you don't get bumps and like weird textures that you don't want.
Gotcha.
So you can add the texture you do want without, you know, getting too muddled. But when you dry brush, you don't add any water. You simply take the paint straight from either the palette or the bottle, whatever you prefer, and you apply it directly. Now, I like to blot it against some paper to diminish the amount of paint that there is on it, give it the exact sort of coating that I want for dry brushing without adding too much paint. And then you just lightly go over the edges. You can always push down harder once you start running more out of paint to deepen it. But if you go hard too fast, you can end up saturating the area too much. Yeah. And then it's not really a highlight. It's just more of the paint.
Gotcha. Now, I see that, like, obviously, you know, you had to deal with a lot of black base coat, but you did have some opportunity to add some kind of gleam and some glam to there.
This was fun because I was able to use some of the quick paints I had and then add some details afterwards. This was when I first got my quick paints. So I started off with the quick paint metallic base that they had for it, and then I went back with some actual silver paint and added little highlights to make it look like the metal is shining off or somewhere it's dull, adding sort of that metallic sheen without doing too much of that work myself.
Now, Richard, how much were you involved with kind of giving DNDWife kind of the kind of color palette?
I think it was mostly doing the color palette, kind of pointing out where I think some colors would be, but you know, she did an amazing job, pretty much entirely on her own. Like all of it is just amazing.
Thank you so much.
Very minimal input for me, rather than just where some of the colors go. Other than that, all of the work was her own, and even some details that I can't remember if I said or you ended up adding in, like the stars and the shield that match the cart. Like I remember seeing that, and I don't remember if I said that or you said that, but I remember seeing that being like great detail there.
I think that's really important when it comes to miniatures. It's more of like the little nuanced nods, like, because obviously everyone's going to try to paint the best, but really it's almost like the imperfections or the little things you add later mean more to the mini than just the kind of the first principal paint job.
I'm also, I think, a big fan of just letting the design kind of take itself where it needs to go in the painting
Inspiration
process.
strikes.
Yeah, well, I try to paint it as close as possible to what the person who owns the miniature and will use the miniature is looking for. So I appreciate that you really liked that. That was great.
And like you were saying with your quick paints, this was also another chance for you to try out some other new paints.
Yeah, and some different techniques too that I hadn't tried. As a miniature painter, I can appreciate sometimes the quickness of some things. So this is really nice to be able to bust a bunch of these out without having to do too much work.
Well, I mean, there's also the glow paints too.
Absolutely. For each of the bases for the miniatures, we included a different color glow paint. So for this one, I have a bright red, and it really is because your color is black here, and I don't have a black glow paint. I don't think those exist.
See, but again, that's where, like I talk about in a few of our other segments, there's such this like serendipity, because the color red, red has much more of an impact, I think, to Tobias' backstory. Yeah. So there actually is, without you knowing it, you actually played a bigger impact to Richard's play because of that color.
Yeah, it also lends a little bit of history when interacting with the world as well. So we can always look back and be like, oh, that's what that meant.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were pretty shocked when we unveiled the kind of glowing bases.
Oh yeah. I was.
I think it kind of showed them it was more of, they first saw it and then it was like, what more is going to be incorporated with these kind of glow effects?
Yeah, well, I wanted to make sure that they could stand out on the map during gameplay, especially because it's difficult sometimes to keep track of where your miniature is all the time. But if it has a glow to it and you know that this is my color, you're like, oh, I know where he is.
And not just that, like my miniature, like we said before, is mostly black, so it is sometimes a little easy to lose on the map. So having like the bright red base makes it so much easier to keep track of.
Yeah, that also definitely gets second in for the DM trying to find where everyone's at. And really, what it is for me, especially, is like I know exactly where my player characters are. Whether I want to shine a black light to really make them pop, or just quickly scout, the battlefield, it makes it real easy.
Yeah, and it adds a little bit of atmosphere to the game, I think, just because a lot of the colors do represent not just the colors that we chose for ourselves for the campaign, but a lot of them represent the power, certain powers that we have, certain abilities.
Yeah, there's little nods to each one of them, and I think there's still a lot more to be revealed later.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll see on each of the minis as we go through, as we keep going through them, each one has that little special kind of little magical pop.
Oh, yeah, so I would really pay attention to the colors. They're important for later. But beyond just this wonderful miniature for Tobias, I want to move on towards the accompanying miniature that is always near Tobias, his cart.
And horse.
And horse, of course. But the cart is really where it's at, I think. Because it's truly a representation that this is Tobias's home, home on wheels. It's really, you're a nomad type of Leonin or Lionfolk. And so we really wanted to exude that sort of, this is your cart, it has your touch of home to it. The mantle is super unique that covers the top of the wagon because it's covered in stars that really represent kind of a little bit of your background and connection with the divine. I love that it's covered in stars, but what did you think? Because we got this miniature really without telling you at first.
Sneaky deal.
Yeah, and we just kind of asked you a little bit about what it looked like, and then we presented it to you. So can you give us, your first impressions?
It wasn't very far off from what I had been picturing in my head. In fact, it was a little bit more... it grounded the idea more in my head, because it almost started off as a joke for me, when I first did it.
Yeah, I did see that a little bit.
Because, when I first started, we were just looking at jobs, and I decided I was going to do the chef, and then I started thinking about I don't want to just carry around a bunch of cooking supplies. Yeah. And then I started thinking of the cabbage guy from Avatar.
Oh, gotcha.
And the guy made me bring out a cart. Yep, and I was I'm if I'm doing a cart and the kind of food I was doing, which is steaming and stuff like that, I was
buns,
I'm I could do a food cart. I was what if I had just a ye old lunch truck, pretty much.
Ye old food cart.
Yeah. It was and then cart that around, and no, it was amazing to see it actually pop up, because again, it's one of those things that you don't really think about too often, but it really grounds you in the world, where it makes you think just seeing it on the map while we're all walking around and doing whatnot, and it adds into the realism and the stakes. If it wasn't there, I think it'd be really easy to it'd be really easy to forget until the DM puts a gun to it and reminds me that it's actually there. Which it's happened a few times with other things, in other campaigns with kids and whatnot, and it's just oh crap, I have to worry about this.
Yeah, it makes a big difference when the art is there in front of you.
And I'm glad that it fit your aesthetic, your view of what it looked like, because besides the beautiful mantle that it has on there, and I'd like to point out that the stars are in glow paint, so if we shine a light on it, they will glow.
Definitely adds to the effect.
But beyond that, the rest of the wagon, really any other uncovered part of the wagon, is covered in a variety of this large assortment of weaponry and shields.
And trophies.
And trophies, yeah. It's everything from spears, hammers, swords, and all sorts of shields, horns, things. It's a real contrast to see between the peaceful nature of the cover of the wagon and then the rest of it. So it lends this intimidating air. How did you marry those two ideals together on the cart? What's the purpose of all of those weapons and shields?
Well, the cart is pretty much Tobias' entire life. When he left home, it's just everything he has. And we've seen before already with spears that he's lost them. So it's got to have some extras,
Okay.
And he can't leave anything anywhere because he doesn't really have anywhere to be now. So everything is on his cart, and if it doesn't fit inside, it's got to go on the outside.
All right, that's a valid point.
I think it makes for like a cool dynamic because like whereas a lot of the other characters, it's just kind of one mini.
Yeah.
We have some other uniqueness with like Bogbean's mini and some of the others, but Tobias is the one where it comes with a package, right?
Yeah.
We get to see not only the horse mini and the cart. So when we see his mini on the table, there's so much more that is built into his character by just seeing those things, right?
Yeah.
Seeing Tobias, seeing the cart, it already creates that story in miniature form.
Oh, yeah. And we've already come up with situations where we've had to, watch the cart, keep the cart safe. So it's really added this other sense of responsibility to the gameplay.
So now, when you painted Tobias's miniature, now painting the cart, which is obviously significantly bigger, but has a little bit more detail, was there something different you had to do in order to do like a cart versus the miniature itself?
So this just the simple difference in textures, honestly. For the cart, the major part of it is all the wood structure of it, so I just use a quick paint for that one because it's really easily building in all the shadow and highlight that I need. After that, I really went with the aesthetic that Richard tried to portray for his cart. So the biggest craziness here was the mantle or the cover of the wagon, because I had to painstakingly paint it like the night sky and then go through and add little stars everywhere to cover it up.
Now, being the experienced painter, is there kind of a brush you would recommend for dry brushing or a paint, or is it just kind of it's more about the technique?
So for dry brushing, you really want a brush with a lot of bristles but short, so that the paint can really move around in there and you have a lot of room for it to splay out.
I've seen ones that look like makeup brushes that are kind of like that big kind of wide.
You can do that as well, honestly. There really is no like true exact brush that you need to have. You can really paint with anything. You can dry brush with any brush, really, as long as you're okay with messing up that brush.
Yeah, gotcha.
But I would recommend,
it's a brush killer.
Yeah, I would recommend something that you can really easily work into a miniature.
So, as a painter, how did having Tobias already painted influence the cart? Like, did you take any influences from him and his design when you were painting the cart?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. I think I really wanted to embody the wilderness aspect of Tobias, his connection with the land. It's got horns on there, leather pieces on there. It's all a sort of reflection, like you said, of his life until that point, because it's his home. It's everything. The really nice part, I think, is the wheels are a great touch, and it really sort of contrasts the white tunic that Tobias has on with his black fur, where the wheels are black with white sort of accents on there in the textures of the wheels and the spokes, so that it lends this like striking feature to a wagon that otherwise would just be like any other normal wagon.
That's pretty cool.
So yeah, I really loved bringing this all together. It was so fun to paint. Even though some of it was painstaking, it really kind of stretched and gave me a challenge to work with. For something that is really a set piece, it isn't like the character work I'm used to, so that was quite lovely to do. But today, it was really great. We got to explore the intricate details of the painting of Tobias, our Lionfolk Cleric for Extraeus, and his iconic cart that we always love seeing with him, because it means lots of yummy food. We went through, we looked at the inspiration behind Tobias's design, some of the painting techniques that I used to kind of bring him to life, and the symbolic elements of this cart himself, and the little ties and nods to the story and history of Tobias. So I really loved going over that. I really loved having you here with us, Richard, as well. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. Anything you want to know, just ask, and we'll try to reply as fast as we come. Be sure to check us out on YouTube at Couple of Nerds Productions. We have many shorts, videos, and other kind of images, so you can see these different minis a little closer that we've been looking at all episode.
Yep. And if you look, we'll try to post some videos showcasing the miniatures together as well, so you can see what they look like.
be sure to check out the Discord to see any pictures that DNDWife will be posting of the cart, Tobias, and any of her other miniatures that she works on.
Yep. Thank you so much.
Plus, they can talk to you.
Sure, be in there.
If you have any questions for Tobias, you can always ask any of the travelers. They're always usually there from time to time.
Yep. You can find him live streaming sometimes, so he's always free to answer a question when he's on. Thank you so much, guys, and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Comic Cave. We hope you feel inspired to create and explore new artistic horizons. Before we go, we'd love to stay connected with you. Join our Couple of Nerds Discord community to share your own artwork, connect with fellow artists, and submit your ideas for future episodes. We can't wait to see what you create and hear your suggestions. And don't forget to check out our Couple of Nerds YouTube channel, where we showcase the artwork discussed in each episode. Watch detailed videos that highlight the inspirations, techniques, and stories behind each piece. Stay tuned for more episodes, where we'll continue to dive into the vibrant world of fantasy art and Dungeons & Dragons. Your creativity is the heart of Comic Cave, and we're excited to see it shine. Make sure to subscribe to Comic Cave, leave us a review, and spread the word. Until next time, keep creating, stay inspired, and may your imagination know no bounds. This is DNDWife signing off. Happy creating, everyone.